I kind of walk through the landscape every day and feel the seasons changing and respond to the way that the weather changes. That kind of feeds into how I'm feeling and the kind of work I make. Being in the countryside, I think it kind of feeds into the poetic, lyrical side of my brain. It helps me think clearly. It definitely is reflected in the work. I suppose noticing the small details that are kind of out in the world and how things kind of stay the same but change every day. I really like working within restrictions and having limited choices about things. So having a kind of limited vocabulary, a limited number of typefaces, limited number of colours, all those things, in a strange way, they kind of free you to just play with the basic building blocks of ideas and messages. And in a way, the graphic design aspect of the work is kind of set. I don't need to worry about that. The main thing that I'm thinking about is the meaning and how I'm going to convey messages through using a few simple words and a few simple typefaces. I kind of strip things back to their essentials, so any superfluous details that aren't really necessary I get rid of. I've really stripped it down now into its purest basic forms, really. I don't think I can take away much more, really, without it not existing in a way. I think I've always been interested in type and how these kind of abstract shapes can represent words and represent ideas. That's something I still think is quite magical. That we all learn an alphabet and we all learn a vocabulary and we all learn the same words, and it's a common language that we all use, and it's quite a magical invention that we can communicate with each other just through using these abstract shapes. I'm always really keen to make comment about the world that we're in, but not being too specific about particular figures. Those people, politicians, all kind of come and go. You've got to understand that things will change, and I just want the work to be kind of universal and timeless and still be around and relevant for people in the future. You know, the work is a bit like an iceberg. The bit that you see is the bit above water, and there's a huge mass kind of supporting these ideas. You want there to be a kind of longevity in the work. You don't want to understand it instantly. You want to have that slow unfurling of messages. The work changes over time as well. The context of language changes over time as history moves along. Some of the work I've made is now 20 or 30 years old. It's from a different time, but because it's talking about the shared experiences of people, it still feels relevant. I've built up a list of opposites, so that's always something that I go to maybe like trigger an idea, love and hate, and war and peace, and yes and no. We're surrounded by forces that are continually pushing against each other, positive and negative, and it's navigating our way through those things that create new ideas. It's like an endless pool of resources to draw on, really. I kind of pick up phrases and words and bits of odd conversation. I try and remember things or write things down, and then maybe a month later or 5 years later, that combination of words could find its way into a new piece of work. Ideas are everywhere, and you just have to keep your eyes open, your ears open, and listen for whatever inspiration's going to come along, and make sure you remember it. Most of the letters that I use are over 100 years old, and they've been combined in lots of different ways to make different words, and I think the evidence and the kind of life that they've led are spelt out in the kind of textures of the letters that we can see now. That link with the history of visual communication and the way that those typefaces have been used in protest. You go back to the suffragette movement, and they were using the same typefaces that I'm using now. I really enjoy that historic link. In 2025, I'm still using a process that hasn't changed for 100 years. Just having that link with the past is really important to me, and I think it underlines the sort of timelessness of all those ideas. I think I'm just drawn to it because it's a real antidote to everything that's digital and clean and lacking character in a way, I suppose. I think by using these letters and this type, it feels human. Those are the kind of things I'm talking about through the work. It's about humanity, and it's about our connections. I never had a plan. I always just wanted to do my own thing, and was quite determined about not having to get a regular 9-to-5 job, and I think there's a different way of doing things. You don't have to work solely for commercial reasons. We're quite free now to be able to choose different paths and develop a following, and if people are interested in what you do, then you can make a living out of being an artist, and by making new work that you feel is relevant and is going to connect with people. Part of what I do is help charities and NGOs and protest groups communicate. For me, because I get so much inspiration from the language of protest, I feel like that's where my work should be as well. Actually on the streets or pasted on the walls or even shared on social media, it still has that impact of human connection. It's really gratifying to work with people who are kind of on the front line of the way that the world's changing. It kind of pushes me forward to be braver with the work and to speak about bigger issues and topics that we need to talk about. It gives the work more of a meaning, I think, and more relevance, that I'm not just taking from the language of protest, I'm actually adding to the language of protest as well. I've always been in between things, so I wasn't really a graphic designer, I wasn't really an illustrator, I wasn't really a printmaker. I was kind of somewhere in between those different areas. I think all my favourite artists are the same, really. They're kind of in between different disciplines, not purely sculptors or filmmakers. Any particular pigeonhole that you can put a creative person in is immediately limiting, I think. I see the work as performing a function, or being there as part of people's lives. It can spark an idea or can change an attitude. It kind of affects a conversation that's held in that room. Just like a visual prompt to maybe suggest a different way of doing things. It's really important that it's affordable. I think everybody should be able to have interest in art, live with it and get inspiration from it. I just want to connect with people through the work and put it out into the world as a kind of positive force, really. I think there is a gentle humour and there's a kind of lightness of touch, really. It 100% reflects my character, who I am and the way I kind of navigate the world. I say yes more than I say no. I just love just being open to what the world's got to offer.